Here it is, that time of year again, the deepest part of the winter. We just had a storm and there are 2 more in the jet stream pipeline for later in the week. Of course, I should not be complaining as over the last few years we have had very mild winters. Even this year, it has been pretty easy and we are due for some larger accumulation. It is February after all. Along with firing up the snowblower every so often, I have been struggling with how to keep myself occupied during these dark times. Yes, I have my YouTube videos, but it has even been harder to come up with new ideas, as I'm sure some of you will say about this video. Even my wife has echoed these feelings. The New England winters are starting to wear on us after more than 30 years, and she has even mentioned selling the house and moving. Now, will that ever happen? Probably not, but we can dream. In order to get through the downtime waiting for spring, I decided to pull out some old books and reread them, one of them being Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. I read this book, or more precisely tried to read this book, many years ago. I never really finished it, something I think many readers struggle with. In the beginning of the book, Pirsig gives one of the best descriptions of why we ride motorcycles. He says, in a car, you're always in a compartment, and because you're used to it, you don't realize that through the car window, everything you see is just like more TV. You're a passive observer, and it's all moving by you boringly in a frame. On a cycle, the frame is gone. You're completely in contact with it all. You're in the same scene, not just watching it anymore, and the sense of presence is overwhelming. Perfect, right? It could not have been said any better. But Zen and the Art is not just about riding a motorcycle. In fact, 2 things Pirsig's book is not really about are Zen and motorcycle maintenance, as he states in the foreword. Rather, Pirsig uses a motorcycle trip he took with his 11-year-old son from their home in Minnesota to California in 1968. He uses this as a vehicle to discuss some pretty heavy philosophical concepts. On my first attempt, I didn't fully understand what Pirsig was trying to say. It didn't seem very Zen to me. But now, after many additional miles, I think I have a better handle on some of the concepts he tackles, and I am better able to read between the lines. You see, this book is really about a man's struggle with life, learning, and sanity. One of those ideas centers around the duality of life, a very Zen or Taoist concept. This is where Pirsig uses motorcycle maintenance as a metaphor. He talks about 2 basic ways that we humans look at life, what he calls classically or romantically. Pirsig defines classical as a mechanistic, real-world view of life. Classical people see things like motorcycles as constituent parts, something to be dissected and manipulated. These are the kind of people who enjoy learning about their bikes and how to work on them. In fact, Pirsig spends a few pages detailing the inner workings of bikes that can make your eyes glaze over. He tends to be a classical thinker following the lines of Aristotle, something Pirsig digs deep into later during the second half of his book. On the other hand, there are those of us who look at life more romantically. Riding is not so much about the motorcycle itself, but about the feelings they give us. I tend to lean this way. In Zen and the Art, Pirsig points to his friend John, who, along with his wife Sylvia, are traveling with the author and his son as romantic riders. Pirsig even expresses his frustration with John for not caring about the inner workings of his motorcycle. Rather, he just wants to ride and enjoy the experience. John is more a follower of Plato, even though he has no idea what that means. This duality of thought is one that is echoed by Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, where he talks about the world of 10,000 things, the world we can see versus what we cannot see, the source of everything, which is the undefinable Tao. Lao Tzu points out that even though we live in the world of 10,000 things, we are not truly from this world. Rather, everything we see and everything we are is derived from an unseen source. The world we see is but an illusion of separateness. In reality, we and everything in nature are all connected. I know this is pretty heady stuff, but ultimately it gets down to finding balance. We live in a world of stuff and technology, and it is easy to get enamored with all the pretty, shiny things. But ultimately, it is not the things in and of themselves that create value. Again, using Lao Tzu's writings, the 11th verse of the Tao Te Ching points out that we can shape clay into a cup, but it is the empty space contained in that cup that gives it value. Even though we place a monetary value on something like a motorcycle, it is not the bike itself that gives us or it meaning. Rather, it is the things we do with it that creates true value. I think Pirsig eventually came to the same conclusion as Lao Tzu. We must find a balance between the mechanical and the romantic. For me, this winter of parked motorcycle syndrome, or PMS, has emphasized this point as I have a new bike sitting in my garage and I'm itching to get out and ride. But I have to be patient. During this time, I enjoy the mechanical process of adding farkles such as driving lights and mounting my GPS. And this can definitely be meditative in nature. But when spring approaches, I become more of a romantic. I want to spend my time riding, creating videos and memories rather than working on my bikes. Saving money by doing it myself becomes less important. Rather than spending hours tinkering, I enjoy using my time writing and creating, which of course has both romantic and classic qualities. Of course, my choice is not the only choice. It is just my version of balance, which is, I think, the point. We all need to find the balance that works for us while understanding that others may find a different point of equilibrium. Just because someone espouses a different approach, it does not mean they are belittling yours. This ability to allow others to hold different opinions sadly seems to be lacking in today's world. For me, grasping the idea of living in the world of 10,000 things, the classical world, while understanding that in reality we are all connected through the Tao or the energy field described by quantum physics or through God, it helps me to have perspective. Yes, we live in a world with the illusions of difference, and it is easy to focus on those perceived differences. But ultimately, we come from the same place, and whether mechanical or romantic, biker or drag queen, we have much more that unites us than separates us. Another thing that Pirsig struggles with is the advancement of technology. Yep, even back in 1974 when this book was published, this was a thing. Pirsig tells us that technology itself is not a bad thing unless we allow it to pull us into the world of 10,000 things, losing ourselves to the beauty all around us. Today, our technology emphasizes our differences by promoting those who yell the loudest. If it bleeds, it leads, and sex sells still ring true. It takes me great effort to ignore the outrage of the day, especially during the winter months when I don't have a motorcycle to ride, which gives me better focus. It is easy to be pulled back in. That is why I choose to reread a good book or learn new things rather than worry about those I can't control. Which brings us to the major struggle of Zen and the art, Pirsig's attempt to define quality. He spends a great deal of time discussing how it is that we know if something is of quality. Pirsig asks, is quality a property of an object, like a motorcycle, or is it subjective, derived from the observer's perceptions? Or is it something else, like an essential property of the universe? I know, this is a little strange, right? I agree. And I think Pirsig muddies the water a little bit with his obsession with the term quality. We can look at a motorcycle and see its lines. We can touch it, smell it, and hear it. But none of these sensations tell us if the bike is quality. Ultimately, that is determined by the interaction with and the perceptions of the observer, that is, you, the rider. This concept is very Zen, but at the same time, digs into the world of quantum reality. To really understand Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, it is essential that we learn a little bit more about Robert Pirsig, for his story plays a big role in the narrative. In Zen and the Art, Pirsig never really tells the entire story, but interjects bits and pieces over the course of the narrative, leaving you to put the pieces together. In 1961, he had a mental breakdown and was institutionalized. During that time, he was diagnosed as schizophrenic and treated with electroconvulsive therapy, at least 14 times by his own account. According to interviews, Pirsig came out of this experience with a more Zen-like approach to life. In the book, his former self, which he calls Phaedrus, was basically submerged. The new Robert was very different, more analytical than the original personality, which distanced himself from his family, especially Chris, who accompanied him on the journey described in the book. Chris comes off in the book as not enjoying the trip, mostly because his father was so different and distant, always deep in thought. However, according to Pirsig, Chris really didn't like the book because it painted an unrealistic picture. He actually very much enjoyed that time with his father. For me, all of the detailed descriptions about philosophy, in particular the differences between Aristotle and Plato and Phaedrus's obsession with quality, point out the problem with getting out of balance. I think that is what Pirsig was getting at. Our Western view of the world is to dissect everything and look at its constituent parts. And while this has led to many amazing discoveries and achievements, it also causes us to very often miss the forest for the trees. Yes, a forest is composed of individual trees, other plants, insects, birds, and many other animals, but at the same time, it is a single interconnected organism. This interdependence is one of the main teachings of Eastern mysticism and is echoed in the teachings of Christ. We are all God's children and should love each other as we do ourselves. A very simple and elegant message that most of us do not live up to. For me, it doesn't really matter what your beliefs are as long as they help you to be a better person and live a more fulfilling life. You can get there through Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Stoicism, or Taoism. What really matters is how you treat yourself and how you treat others. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff I think about during the winter, and I'm sure, like me, you wish the snow would go away so I can get back on the road and stop talking about all of this philosophical stuff. Ride safe and keep squeezing your lemon.